that has stopped working, and they were supposed to have replaced it by this morning, but it's not in. So bit.ly/Choshen Mishpat, where C and M are capitalized. That's how you get in. Okay. Sorry about that, folks, but we are back.
Good morning, Rabbi Korupkin.
Yes.
Do you know the password to get in by phone or to get into the shear?
There is no password. All you have to do is just go to bit.ly/.
No, for the phone only. I'm in a car.
For the
I
phone.
just want to dial in.
I don't think that there's a password for the phone.
I think it's 835-201.
83520.
While you're driving. Well, yeah, please don't do this while you're driving, Izzy. We want everyone to be safe. Okay. All right. So what we were learning about yesterday, if I'm an escrow entity and I can't remember what the escrow instructions were, then even if a Kinyan Sudar, even if a transactional Kinyan is recorded in the escrow document, so you would think that in that kind of situation where the Kinyan was made and let's say a sale is recorded and the Kinyan for the sale is recorded in the shtar, then certainly I should give the documents to the buyer so that the buyer has the power as lo yitnenu lamisha hiknalo kishema. He says, if you remember that the document was given to you by the seller, and you clearly remember that, then you should not give it to the buyer. And the reason is because even though a Kinyan is recorded in the document, maybe the seller wanted to reserve the right of holding on to it for a certain amount of time. And that's certainly true if the seller is telling you, please do not give it to the buyer. You should also not give it to the seller or to the heirs of the seller, because maybe it is a perfectly legal document, and he did full-heartedly sell it to the buyer. If the seller is alive and he tells you, I did not fully sell this to the buyer, even though a Kinyan is recorded, the reason why I held on to the bill of sale and did not give it to the buyer is because I told him that the sale would be final when he fulfilled certain conditions, and he neglected to do so. Therefore, you have to give it back to me. So then you should listen to him. So just a couple of pieces in the Imrei Yaakov over here. Really, there's only one piece, Kuf Pei Vav. Shenichtav bo shekanu ha'edim avur hamikabel. That if it says that there was a kinyan, meaning that the witness is right, that the Edim made a kinyan on behalf of the recipient. So that's a situation where testimony records that there was a full-fledged kinyan. Okay, that's all we needed to see from yesterday's halacha. Now we're going to go on. I just have to open up the next packet, which is over here. Here we go. And does everyone see the new halacha mem tes? Okay. Okay. Shtar chov shenimtza bashuk. You find a promissory note on the street. In other words, you find. Am I recording? Yes, I am recording. Shtar chov shenimtza bashuk. You find a promissory note, a piece of legal document that basically says that Shimon owes Reuven $100,000. You find that on the street. Okay, im hamal v'mod l'lova shenofal mimenu yachzirenu lo. So if the lender agrees to the borrower that it fell from him, that it's really the lender's document, so then it should be returned to the lender. Aval im halo v'mod l'malva shenofal mimenu, but if the borrower tells the lender that it fell from him, that he's the one, in other words, he paid back the loan ostensibly, and that he was holding on to this promissory note as proof of payment, lo yachzirenu lo, shekeven shelo nizhar bishmiraso min hastam eno shtar kasher. So, in other words, there's one scenario where he describes it as the lender agreeing to the borrower that it fell from, shenofal mimenu, that it fell from the borrower. When the lender acknowledges to the borrower, it fell from the borrower, so then you should give it back to the borrower. But if the borrower acknowledges to the lender that it fell from the lender, so then you should not give it back to the lender. Shekevin shalonizar bishmiraso, because how did it end up on the street? In other words, how did a document like this, which is worth $100,000 of collection, how did it end up not being, how did this person, it's like there's something suspicious here, because this really was a document that could be used to collect $100,000 that is owed to you, you would have been more careful with it. And therefore, here's what we're worried about. We're worried about some kind of collusion. Shema pira'o kvar, v'nafal mehalova. Maybe what really happened is that the lova paid off the debt. It fell out of the lova's hands. Shelo chashash l'shamro. Because since it's already history, he's already paid back the debt, maybe he wasn't that careful, because normally you would tear up a note like that and just dispose of it. So maybe he wasn't careful, and he just fell out of his pocket. And maybe what's going on over here now is that in a situation like that, what kind of collusion could take place? The malva asks the lova a favor. He says, Reuven asked Shimon a favor. He says, listen, do me a favor. You paid me back the $100,000. I want to ask you another favor. You know how I saved you from going completely mechula. Do me a favor. There were these people who I sold a property to. after we drew up this paper. And I would like to be able to renege on the deal that I made with them. I sold them property after the loan, after I lent you the money. And actually, it's the Lova sold property after there was already a lien on his property. This is the collusion. So as he'll explain, he says, Shema Pero Kavar, Vinispatel al Yedei Zehashtar. In a case where the Lova paid back the money already, the shtar now is no longer collectible. It's no longer a collectible instrument once the loan has been paid off. And this is true even if the date of maturity of the loan did not yet arrive. So in other words, it says the loan was made on January 1st, full payment is due on June the 1st. It's now in the middle of March, and lo and behold, I find this promissory note that says that the loan is due on June the 1st. But everyone agrees that the loan was not yet paid. So you have to worry about the following. We assume that people do not pay a loan back until the due date. He says, but maybe the fact that it just is found on the street, that's an indication that the loan has already been paid. And that's why the Lova was no longer careful to watch it. And the fact that the Lova is claiming that I still have to pay back the $100,000, we don't really fully believe him, because maybe there's some kind of trickery that they're trying to pull a fast one. He says what happens is that they're trying to confiscate property from people who bought real estate without a guarantee, without a warranty. So what will happen is that it does happen that a person might buy a piece of real estate at a very, very discounted rate when there's no warranty. What do we mean by no warranty on real estate? I sell you a piece of property. I basically tell you it's mine, but I can't guarantee that you won't lose it in case any of my creditors come. That because I have creditors, if my creditors come and I default on my debt, they will come and confiscate this property. Are you still willing to buy it? And if a person says, yes, I'm still willing to buy it, there's a risk factor and he's still willing to buy it. So that's what's called buying real estate without a warranty, right? Normally, when you buy real estate, it comes with a warranty. But if there's an explicit clause in the contract that the sale is being made without a warranty, as is, just like on a used car lot, right? So then the buyer is going to be out of luck if a creditor comes along and confiscates that property. So here's the collusion that we're concerned about. The debtor, Shimon, borrowed $100,000. He paid it back in full. Reuven says, I have a great idea. Remember that piece of property that you sold after you borrowed the money from me? You sold that property in February. Let's you and I do a deal. You claim that you didn't pay back the debt. You claim that you defaulted on the loan, and I'll agree with you. I'll back you up, and then I'll go ahead and seize the property that Levi bought because I'm a creditor, and then you and I will sell it and split the proceeds. Great. It's a great idea. Of course, it's Geneva, but it's a way of making a fast buck on somebody else's cheshbon. So he says, that's why Jews are so smart. We have Talmudic heads because we know all the angles, okay? The im mefurash bishtar lahedja she'ein bo achrayus she'eino mishabed nechasav. He says, if it says explicitly in the sale of the real estate document that it's without a warranty, So then, v'lo yuchal hamalva litrof mima shekvar shemochar onasan achar halva. So he says, in a situation, however, where in the loan document it says that the lender does not have a right to seize encumbered assets as a collection for his loan, then you would return it back to the creditor in a situation where they both agree that it fell from the creditor. Why? Because then you don't have to worry about collusion anymore. If there's a clear disclaimer that the creditor does not have the ability to seize assets from a purchaser, so then that's from encumbered property. So then you don't have to worry about this. Okay, fine. A total third party. Yehuda's walking down the street one day, and he finds this document. And he knows the two people that they sit next to him in shul, and so he goes over to Reuven and he says, I found this promissory note. It says that you're owed $100,000, that Shimon owes you $100,000, and Reuven says, yeah, but now before I give it back to you, let's consult with Shimon. Maybe Shimon is the one that this fell from. And maybe it fell from his pocket, because there's more of a likelihood that it fell from Shimon's pocket, because if it really fell from the creditor, why wouldn't you watch it carefully? I mean, it's like a check worth $100,000. Why would you let that fall out of your pocket? So let's check with Shimon. So we check with Shimon. If Shimon says, yes, I did borrow that money, but I paid it back, then you certainly should not give it back to Reuven, right? But if Shimon says, yeah, it's true, and I still owe the money, so then you got to think about collusion. That's basically what this halacha is saying. Right. Well, that's the thing, is that if the bottom line is that if you do find a document like this, then you should go to the Rav and ask him, what am I supposed to do? And yeah, unless the Rav's a party to the loan, yeah, then you definitely want to steer clear. Go ask another rabbi. But I never would have suspected this if I hadn't seen this halacha. I would say it's pretty open and shut. They both agree that the loan has not been paid. Oh, yeah. Why would I ever think of it? Yeah. Well, if Yehuda's in,
you'll never know.
Yeah, that's right. They tell Yehuda, we're dropping it in the back row of the shul. Go and find it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So anyway, ba'achshavos hakinyanim hamalva ala lokucha shelakchu imenu achar zman ksivas hashtar. Va'afilu hamalva nosein bo siman muvhak, and even if the malva gives a clear sign that it's his, like he says, I know for sure that this is my document. It's got a certain signature that looks like this. Ein machzirin lo, you still shouldn't give it back out of a concern of this collusion. Aval im hushtar she'ein govin bo mea mishubadim yachzeren lamalva. But if it is a promissory note that does not have the power to collect from encumbered property, so then you do give it back to the lender. Im halova moda shenafal mimenu. If the borrower acknowledges that it's the malva's note and he hasn't paid it back yet. Vim eno moda lo yachzer lo lazeh v'lo lazeh. But if the lova says, I paid it back already, and the malva says you didn't pay it back yet, and now there's really someone for sure is lying here, okay? You find a promissory note on the floor, and the lender says, hey, that's mine. And the borrower says, no, I paid it, and it's mine. I was about to destroy it, and I just put it in my pocket, and before I had a chance to leave shul, I was putting my jacket back on after laying tefillin, and it just fell out of my pocket. So then don't give it back to either one of them. Ella al pi siman muvak, unless one of them can provide an absolute siman that indicates that after the debt was already paid back, there is, there's a siman that you can indicate that one of them is telling the truth. Uprate dine simani shtaros yesh bahem chilukim rabim. He says all of the details of what would be considered a valid siman, a sign in this case, are multifaceted. Lekach ein lahachzir ela al pi horaz beistin, and therefore don't rely on your own, your own logic. Take it to beistin. In other words, if you really are stuck in that kind of situation where there's a conflict between two people and the documentation is ambiguous, take it to beistin. And he says, and this is true, even if you find a promissory note that actually records a transaction between the two parties, that there was a loan and that the transaction that records the loan between the two people, that, is written in it as well. Because even when there's a transaction recorded in the shtar, you still have to be concerned that maybe this debt has been paid back already. He says, but a bill of sale that has a kinyan recorded in it, there's no concern that maybe something was paid back, because this is not a promissory note, it's a bill of sale. And it records a kinyan, so it's unlikely that anyone reneged on the deal. If a kinyan is recorded, it seems like it was fully consummated, the sale. So then in that situation, yachzirenu lahalokeach o hamakabel matana. Then if you find this on the street, you should give the bill of sale to the buyer, to the person who is recorded as the buyer. And that's true even if the seller protests, even if the seller says, hey, that's mine. But if it's a bill of sale, then give it to the buyer, because there's clearly more evidence to side with the buyer than there is to side with the seller in that kind of situation. Now, uchesuva, what about a ksuva? So just last night, I did a ksuva di irkisa. I think I mentioned this in yesterday's halacha. Just last night, I drew one up for a couple who came to me and said, my wife can't find the ksuva. My wife can't find the ksuva. And so I said, well, you can't live as a husband and wife if you can't find the ksuva. She doesn't know where the ksuva is. So what we do is we don't rewrite a standard ksuva. We write what's called a ksuva di irkisa, a ksuva literally that was lost, and it has totally different text. Why does it have a totally different text? Because if you were to write a new ksuva, you'd have to date it from today. And so there's two problems with dating it from today. Let's say a couple has been married for 30 years. They have 5 kids. You write a ksuva dated from Tafshin Pei Gimel 5783, and they have a 20-year-old son. That implies that son was born out of wedlock. So that's not good. It's not good yichus for the kids when they make a shidduch with another family, and the rabbi's going through all the names and says, show me the ksuva so I can see how to spell the family names and stuff like that. And they discover a ksuva that's dated, 30 years after the couple allegedly had gotten married. So that's one reason. So what we do, and then the second reason, of course, is for the financial interests. If a woman is owed money and a debt has been generated from 30 years ago, then she has a lien on the husband's estate from 30 years ago. For you to post-date it now to the current date means that you're destroying the lien that she had on the guy's property. Now, that second argument is not really a compelling argument in Zman Hazeh, because as I explained to the couple, when a woman wishes to, if a man and a woman get divorced, the Beis Din routinely tears up the ksuva. Why do they do that? Because they verify that the financial arrangements between the man and the woman have already been transacted between the two of them and have been settled. And so if all the financials have been settled, then there's a presumption that the ksuva was included in that settlement. The ksuva is worth between 20 and 30 Canadian dollars, 20 to 30,000 Canadian dollars, based on the fluctuating price of silver. So if a woman, usually an estate is much larger than that in today's world. So if their couple's going to get divorced, the Beis Din is going to make the presumption that that as part of the financial settlement, she's getting more than the amount of the ksuva, and so therefore they tear up the ksuva. There are, I am not aware of any cases. I know of cases where the ksuva, where a woman tried to collect from the ksuva, and it created tumult in the Beis Din. But ultimately, what happens is they end up settling without using the ksuva as an instrument of collection. Okay, so when he talks about the ksuva, he says uksuva dina kishtar chov v'chosheshin bo lepirono lekinunya. He says a ksuva that you find on the street. Let's say you find, couple is clearing out their house, they're packing, and they're throwing out all the bunch of old documents. And a lot of times, people won't realize that this piece of paper that has Hebrew script written on it is of any legal significance. So it could be a woman threw out her ksuva, and it just got thrust in the recycling bin, and then the raccoons came or the wind came, and it blew it out onto the street. And now you see this ksuva on the sidewalk. What's this ksuva doing on the sidewalk? Or you know what else can happen is that after the couple gets married, and this has happened quite often, they leave the ksuva in the wedding hall. And it's true. It happens quite often, unless it's one of these big artistic ksuvas. The ksuva gets left in the wedding hall. It either gets thrown away or it gets tossed, it just gets left with a bunch of papers. And they're not allowed to live as husband and wife, not realizing that the ksuva is an important document. And, it's the night of my wedding. Who's going to worry about paperwork, So it's, yeah. So anyway, and therefore, the Choshen bo lepirona lekinunya, and therefore, in the event that you find a ksuva on the street, even when both parties say that it's my wife's ksuva, you have to be concerned about collusion. Maybe the husband already paid her the ksuva. They already got divorced. He paid her off the ksuva, and now there's collusion between them. Hey, let's go use this to collect an old, to collect property, that was you sold off. Or that I, the husband, sold off and previously, and then we'll split it between us. Okay, I will have to hold it here. We'll do the parentheses in Mirza Shem tomorrow. Take care, everybody.